Christine. Hi, Christine.
Top of the morning to you all.
To you. All right. I am going to call the meeting to order for the West Haven Subcommittee of the MARB. It is November the 15th, and we are having this meeting a little bit hybrid. Some are on site and some are on the Teams meeting and panel.
Are recording.
Thank you. For opening comments, I just want to thank the city of West Haven for accommodating us for this subcommittee and having us here, and looking for those of us to help me pay attention to those that are on Teams. As you raise your hand, I am this back and forth thing with my head, and so please don't hesitate to speak up to let me know that you're raising your hand. Mr. White, welcome. Julian and I do have a meeting back in Hartford this afternoon, so I just want to make sure that we don't run over too far so that we can't get back into Hartford. That's all I have for opening comments. Christine? Ms. Shaw?
No opening comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, all.
So the first item on the agenda this morning is approval of the minutes from September the 20th. I do have one addition to make, but can I get a motion?
Move.
Thank you, Pat.
Second.
Stephen? As far as discussion, I'd like to add Simon's name to attendee because he did join the meeting at the last one as a staff member. Any other discussion? Hear none. Right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right. Everybody's in favor, the motion has carries and the minutes have been approved. Next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 2021 audit. We will be looking for an update. I'd like to hear from the city and the Board of Ed, unless the city is representing the Board of Ed.
I
Give us
can,
an update on the audit.
I can certainly speak to that. Scott Jackson, Finance Director for the City of West Haven. We have provided all of the information requested by our auditors, PKF O'Connor. They were hoping to have an opportunity to review the Cohn-Resnick audit before providing us a preliminary document for management discussion and analysis. November 30th is the contract date. As I think you are all well aware, our timelines are shrinking in terms of being able to provide a comprehensive management discussion and analysis. So we will need to determine what with our auditors, what the sort of drop dead date is for them to provide us something which we can respect.
So they have all of the materials. Have you seen a draft?
We have not seen a draft because they wanted to incorporate any information from but they understand that there is only so much time on their contract. So at some point they're going to have to, if they don't get the Cohn-Resnick audit, they're going to have to supply us with information absent that material.
Sure.
And from the board has submitted all requested items as well.
Thank you.
Question, is there? Okay. David Taylor, Assistant Finance Director, City. Is there a timeline for Cohn-Resnick to give you guys the report?
Their contract has been extended to November the 30th, and we do not have a scheduled meeting as of yet as to the results. It's not just West Haven that's being presented,
right.
It's all cities. So, but as far as my comments regarding the city of West Haven, you know the information that you provided them. So I think you can anticipate what the outcome would be based on the information that you had already provided them. And so whether you were able to provide final documents or not final documents to make changes to the initial input, that I think would, West Haven is in the know,
Sure.
is what I'm going to say.
Yeah, it's just the auditors are waiting.
Understand?
Yeah.
Well, I think that they could clash, exactly. And I don't know if we would be looking for an extension or not at this very moment. We have not been updated yet from Cole.
So, based upon this information, unless, OPM objects, I think the city will seek, draft preliminary from PKF O'Connor so that we can begin our management discussion at this point.
Anything else to add to the audit? Are you aware of any management letter comments that have been brought to your attention or not yet?
Not yet.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is for the subcommittee members to provide some feedback on questions that they wanted to take up on as a topic item at the subcommittee level. At a recent MARB full board meeting, a few of the members had voiced an interest in following up with the subcommittee on specific topics noted in the Cohen-Resnick report. And let's keep in mind that the original report was based on interim reporting from the city of West Haven, and that interim reporting is what triggered the outcome of their report. The final report has not been issued as of yet. And some of those measures that were noted already in the Cohen-Resnick report have already been addressed and starting to take place on their deficiencies noted. And that with the recent hire of Whittlesley to complete a comprehensive financial organizational assessment that will provide the financial manager the roadmap to address areas of needing improvement and the lack of proper internal controls at the city. I just want to remind the members before we open up for this discussion that we do not want to replicate any of the work that Whittlesley is being hired to do in this particular area, and that there is still an ongoing law enforcement investigation underway. And before we start to have a discussion about this, I thought it would be helpful for the committee members to get an update from Julian on he was asked to reach out to the state ethics on training for the city. And I think it will be helpful for the members to learn what he had learned from his discussion.
Right, the board members, so this is obviously directly related to some of the issues that have come up in discussion. The board members have expressed an interest in if there were opportunities for the state ethics commission to provide some training to local officials. Reach out to the Office of State Ethics and spoke to the executive director there. Said the state has no official jurisdiction over municipal matters. However, they do occasionally provide training to local officials. They provide technical assistance in an advisory capacity. And so based on that conversation, it looked like there are probably two opportunities here. If the MARB is interested in pursuing these, one would be they do have sort of a package training curriculum that they provide. It's based on best practices, so they don't train to individual localities' own charter or ethics ordinance per se, but they do train to state standards and best practices. And they'll provide it for really any local officials that the client wants to line up. So it could be elected officials, appointed officials. It could go to line staff. It's kind of however municipality wants to structure it, and that's pretty straightforward. They also provide technical assistance for municipalities that are looking to either modify or adopt new codes of ethics. And so they can help with structuring an ordinance or a charter provision, if it's a charter update. They can help with developing enforcement mechanisms, setting up how members can be appointed, who should do the appointing. And so I know that the city has made some movement on looking at either an ordinance or modifying the charter. I think there's something in the making. I don't know how far along that is, but this might be an opportune moment for the city to touch with these folks or to bring these folks in to provide some of their insight in how to best structure local codes of ethics. Now that the local commission has been rejuvenated and reconstituted and is now active. Maybe not directly part of this agenda item, but definitely related and something that looks like there are some opportunities to some assistance.
He has a question.
Yeah, Kim, it's Bob White, if it's okay to say something?
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, thank you. I had taken a look at the Cohn-Resnick report, and which, as you said, was limited to certain CARES Act funding. And they found some instances of sort of self-dealing that they thought might extend beyond the CARES Act expenditures. And that's the area I'd like to see some additional inquiry. I fully support the policies and procedure changes going forward. And, you know, ethics training may be something, but there, as we have said, there has been a culture of non-compliance for decades, and that doesn't go away with training. It seems to me that there are people, or there may be people, I don't want to reach conclusions, that find the lack of procedures as an opportunity to take advantage of it. And I think it's our duty, knowing what Cohn-Resnick says, to bring this to light. You know, ultimately the voters are going to be deciding how their city is run. It's not up to us. So I think all we can do is provide sunlight. And that's what I'd like to see us investigate. The first finding from Cohn-Resnick was had to do with Baybrook remodelers and Mr. Carney. Cohn-Resnick suggested that additional inquiries and procedures be performed in connection with Mr. Carney and his other companies and other vendors to see if payments are valid throughout. They had found that he had been paid for something that probably hadn't been done. The second item that they found was having to do with CHIP's Wrecker Service, city council member owned by city council member Robert Bruneau. He's also the principal of other vendors within the city. There was something like 170,000 that went out the door to him for vendors. Again, the question is, was this valid? So I think additional procedures ought to be done there as Cohn-Resnick recommended. Cardinal Rule LLC, principal is Mr. Pocock. Mr. Pocock is related to Erica Pocock, an associate of Mr. DeMassa. Again, I don't think we go anywhere near the DeMassa thing. As you've said, that's part of law enforcement, but this seems to be something different. Again, they asked about other inquiries regarding associates of Mr. DeMassa. And then there was they asked for further inquiry with Attorney Tiernan. And again, that may be something to look at. Again, I don't make any conclusions. It's just that they suggested these go forward. In addition, there was some comp time that was the propriety of which was questioned. There were 4 people, I think, that have come up, Mr. Tiernan, Thomas McCarthy, Beth Sabo, and Louis Esposito. There was also bonuses to 2 contractors of the authorization being unknown, Mr. Chiarelli and Mr. Fergano. They did finally, they said that there were abuses that are likely citywide regarding overtime, and exempt employees receiving overtime. We've talked about the credit card. I don't know, again, in the past, if there have been substantial abuses. I know that things are being put in place to prevent that. So that was my summary of what Cone Resnick said ought to be followed up. And I think it should. I'll be guided by you whether, who does that. But I really think we have an obligation to do it and to share our findings with the voters of West Haven, whatever they are.
Any other comments? Members first. Oh, okay.
Defer to the mayor if she has something to ask. Those same mayor?
I just wanted to talk about the ethics component of, and thank you, Julian, for giving a great summary. The ethics board is fully staffed and it has been. I replaced, I think, 1 or 2 members. They have done a lot of work already. And they have a proposed ordinance that I'm reviewing currently, and that I'm going to go over with the Corporation Council, and then we're going to bring it forward to the City Council. And it gives, what they were concerned with charter revision is where we are, and this is what the committee had told me. They had already, tried charter revision in the last time, and then it's, if it gets voted down again, we still have the same issue. So, I mean, you can always propose charter revision after the ordinance, if you will, and if that's a better fit at the time. The ordinance would be a first read, a second read at a different city council meeting, and then a vote. But I thought it was very comprehensive. They take this very seriously. They're very interested in helping facilitate change in West Haven.
Yeah, just, Julian, if you could send me the information of that group and I'll get to the ethics committee, we can have that ordinance review by that group.
Yeah, so I can give you the contact info of, reach out to, and I can give them a
Perfect.
heads up that they'll be.
Well, not from me, I'm referred to the
From
ethics
the
committee, I'll
state,
get,
some, yeah.
they're independent. Okay.
Okay.
I'll recommend that they contact.
Yeah.
Are any of their materials, I'm sorry,
It-
they're accessible online?
I mean, just, I don't know about, I know that obviously the statutes, the state code, and I don't think they have training materials per se that are out there.
Any other comments?
But just with regard to the ethics training, is this proposed for the ethics committee and city personnel? Or is it just?
They can, so they are willing, they have a history of providing it for any local officials. They're willing to do it for any. Room filled with people, or you could bring discrete groups. Maybe there's a different angle for elected officials and a different emphasis for, it's really however the client set it up.
So we have that at the office where we are required to do that as working for the state, and it is an online item, and we have to go through and answer questions. That you see a video, you answer questions, and then you respond, whether you got it right or whether you didn't get it right, whether you passed the test or whether you didn't pass the test. We have those type of requirements, and it was asked for Julian to research this from the MARB and to come back with this information. And I wasn't sure if the MARB wanted to take action as far as or propose from the subcommittee level to the full MARB that one of the items that we had put in our training plan for tier 4 was ethics and training.
Well, I certainly think it's beneficial. I mean, some of the lapses that I see are not really some deep dive into ethics, but common sense stuff like,
Right.
I can't sign off on something for my brother, to that degree.
Yeah.
To that end and kind of overlapping, I know, because Attorney Tierney talked about a proposed ordinance Certainly you can't run afoul of what the charter says. If folks are appointed, my understanding is, I think, by the mayor or referred to the council from the mayor for appointment.
Approved by the
Right.
city council, yes.
And then ultimately, if there's a finding of some ethical violation, it gets sent back to the mayor. Mayor to do what she will with it. But I think having something robust that can work within the charter and even clarify some more things about what the expectations are. City employees, especially those who are in positions, to authorize things is beneficial. I mean, to Mr. White's comments, I agree. My issue is, as far as any issues with Representative DeMassa, it's my understanding those are going to be concluding soon anyways. I don't know what degree the continuance of any investigation by state or local law enforcement officials, where that status is. I don't think necessarily we have to continue to wait, since this is, it affects the day-to-day operations of the city. My issue with things that came up in the Cohn-Resnick audit is more trying to find out how they were authorized, who authorized them, how they slipped through the cracks. I mean, I just really have to say that we kind of talk like there's almost like nothing in place, and we're trying to put some things in place, but there's plenty of things in place. There's a charter that's very specific on things, and policies that have been in place. It's really getting people to subscribe to those policies and best practices of doing things. And I've raised this before, probably about 2 years ago, I believe, where I think in looking at some of the things with the CRF funds, whether it would be payouts for comp time, whether it would be bonuses for contractors, where it's just like it says COVID bonus, and have like a 48-hour turnaround time in payment of an invoice, which to me, in my municipal experience, is record breaking. So, I mean, to me, the question comes is outside of how those things went through the process and there was no red flag raised. Certainly, I'm familiar with the process with Mr. DeMassa's pilfering of CRF funds, but some other things that went through. And then the question comes is, under the charter, because it's there already, and it may not rise, and I don't think some of these things are not under investigation, so it may not rise to necessarily a criminal act, but under the charter, if it's determined that there's a payment that was given or received in violation of the finance practices and authorizations in the charter, that the people who receive those payments are liable to return them to the city. And that's what I want to look into, because when we look at overall budgets and money that we've given and funds that come in from state or federal government, when you're looking at 7 figures all the time, I think sometimes in government we lose sight of $2,000 here, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. And, it's important because those things add up. I think that's kind of where I'm looking to go with this, more of a where did it fail in the process? Because then we can highlight very clearly where it failed. And it's not to cast blame. I mean, listen, we're in the soup already with this stuff. So it's really to show that, even though we have something in place that spells out this process, this is where this thing failed, and something like this is inherently just improper, and maybe have got to change a little bit of the way of thinking, to raise red flags in people's heads when these things come across people's desks, to say, this is what we can't do anymore. So, in the near future, we can explore that more, but I don't want to, you guys have here if you ever need that. So I'll conclude my comments with that.
Oh, thank you.
Tom.
Tom? Mr. Hamilton?
Sure. Thank you. I just wanted to sort of lend my support to the line of inquiry that Mr. White laid out. I think he did a nice job of highlighting those areas from the Cohn-Resnick report that do really require and that this board follow up on. So I guess my question is, or the issue that I sort of throw out there is, what is the best way to follow up on those issues? And is it, is that part of the scope of what we expect Whittlesby to be undertaking? Is that a responsibility that manager when that position is filled, or is there some other avenue that we think would be the most appropriate way to follow up on those issues? But I do think that Mr. White is correct that that those issues do require follow up. So I just wanted to sort of lend my support to that, and I think any one of those options is a way to address it.
Ms. Dennison, may I respond to that?
Second. You're all set, Tom? Yeah.
He dropped the mic, he's out.
Oh, so, okay, your hand is still up.
Christine?
Thank you. I echo Mr. Hamilton's comments in support of Mr. White's, as well as the other council members. Reference has been made to a culture of ethics. And while I think that is the priority in front of us, I think what we have seen in our general oversight is that there needs to be a culture of compliance. And I understand that part of the scope of work that Whittlesey has been tasked with is identifying best practices for fiscal controls, for adherence with best practices, both in terms of, accounting, the payroll issues that we've seen. I think really the compliance piece is at the root of the concerns expressed around who's complying with the ethics disclosures and the like. And so I imagine that will be a focus of the Whittlesey engagement, and I really am seeking confirmation from OPM on that. And if it's not an explicit aspect of their scope of work, it should be. Because I think that oftentimes when we speak in terms of aspirationally, that can mean different things to different people. But when we speak about compliance with specific rules and ordinances, we already can see that the city charter has requirements as it relates to ethics disclosures. And that is not something that has been adhered to in a consistent way. So if you could confirm that will be, Ms. Kennison or Mr. Freund, will be an explicit aspect of the review that we will have an opportunity to evaluate, that would be appreciated.
Yes, they have, it is included in their scope of work as far as internal controls and compliance, and literally making sure that what is the existing practice and what is the practice that should be put into place with recommendations, Ms. Shaw. But you did touch upon a couple of items as far as at Mr. Hamilton, as far as who should be taking this work up. I will say that while Whittlesey is hired to look at all of the city's policies, procedures, and internal controls, practices, expertise of those that hold the positions, recommendations of the positions that should be put in place for a financial office, and or when I say financial, I mean that loosely, because I'm talking about all of the financial offices, which would then be payroll, which would be payroll, accounts payable, tax collections, anywhere that that has any impact within the financial structure. They will also be looking at the controls and the walkthroughs of the documents, as far as where does it start, where does it land to get a check out the door, and who is touching it along the way. to make sure that separations of duties is built in. So Whittlesley will be touching on some of those, but they will not be doing this exact work that Mr. White had brought up to the full MARB. And we're not looking to change that scope of work at this moment. So there is a discussion as to, do we want to hire somebody else to be able to just focus on the materials that were already there? Do we want to take into consideration, and I haven't even looked at this or even explored it. I'm throwing it out there at this very moment. While Colm Resnick was involved with the original report and they were going to be coming back with a report, would they consider expanding their scope of work or going under a different scope of work to go for a deeper dive in the areas that have been addressed and brought to our attention today? Those are some options, or is it somebody else? So
To that point, Ms. Kennison, I recall that the city described the engagement of Carmody and Torrance on issues related to expenditure of COVID relief funds. Is any aspect of that firm's engagement speaking to the general compliance issues? And is that something that this committee and the MARB could evaluate as well? Perhaps Mr. Tiernan could shed light on that if he's there.
Oh, so Carmody and Torrance was assigned to provide legal support along with another contractor for the future and current expenditures of COVID funding. I don't, they have a full plate going forward, so they weren't really engaged to go backwards. I don't know how we would do that.
I'm not speaking, I am actually speaking prospectively, Mr. Tiernan, in terms of recommendations on a framework that would address some of the shortcomings, certainly some of the compliance-related shortcomings related to the expenditure of COVID funds. So it would be prospective, not retrospective in nature.
I wouldn't have a problem with assigning them that additional.
Since it's so closely correlated with their existing work, it may make sense for them to offer their commentary.
And as Mr. Tiernan mentioned, we also have UHY working on compliance review simultaneously for prospective requests for payments. For ARPA.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to add that another piece of information that will be at your disposal is the financial audit. Which are designed to find things like that. So once we have PKF audit, there should be some insight. Now, that wasn't particularly focused on certain transactions. However, there are elements of an audit that we cover.
Not the deeper dive.
No,
that
not the
we're
deeper
looking
dive,
for.
but
Right.
it would be a piece of information that's relevant.
Understand. Stephen,
Kim?
Hold on one second, Mr. White, please. Stephen has been waiting
Oh, sorry.
patiently.
I just wanted to agree with Mr. White. But, we're looking for solutions. And I've been on this committee now for a few years. And what we continue to talk about the same things. Which bothers me. My view is is the auditing firm, whoever they are, now or going forward. The only way you're going to make the accountability correct, you're going to find all these issues that keep continue to be unraveled through audits like Colm Resnick, which I don't think we really spent enough time delving into some of the issues that they found, because I think that it is, I know that we've had a culture here in West Haven that has not been favorable for generations. I think we have to go one step further on every overall audit. I think you have to do a forensic audit, a random forensic audit on one or two departments and they can pick them randomly, so everybody's on notice. That's the only way you're gonna solve this. And I find it a little distressing for me. And again, maybe I'm oversimplifying this, but I don't think there isn't any ethical training that is gonna make someone that is unethical, ethical. You either are or you aren't. At least that's been my experience through many years in business. So you can do all the training, and I hope it doesn't cost too much, because at the end of the day, you're either ethical or you're not. So I think the vetting process has to be looked at. I think the old, in my view, the old boys network of, hiring your cousin's second cousin, which is what I kind of see going on here, is something that you really have to look into. And I think also, what I've been reading about the way the state works and with municipal laws, and I'm certainly not a lawyer, but I keep coming across things like the home rule and the Dillon rule. And the home rule is what, as I understand, and any lawyer can probably correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. White, but the state must have ethical laws that apply throughout the state. And why West Haven isn't under, or any municipality isn't being made to comply with those from a legal standpoint, and is I personally don't really understand, but I know that that's how the state works, that state law supersedes municipal. So I think anybody that is not ethical needs to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, because what they are doing is pulling the wool over the citizens' eyes who are paying taxes, and they're taking tax money and inappropriately dispersing it. So that's my view.
I think you gotta keep that open for purposes.
Yeah, it's a public meeting, the door's gotta be open.
Because you really don't need the music.
So, I hate to oversimplify it, but I think we're at that point where this is just really simple stuff. You're either ethical or you're not. No ethic committee or ethical training is going to make someone that's hired by the city of West Haven more ethical.
But there is awareness that goes with that. I just want you to be aware, such as within ethics training, not everybody is aware of the process of whistleblowing and what that process is. And so sometimes people will lay silent, and for those that are not, and they could be ethical, but they're not trained as to that whistleblowing. I think that is important, that folks know that there is an avenue.
I'm not saying the training isn't
Yeah.
worthwhile.
Okay.
I'm saying that if there isn't any ethical training that I could possibly imagine that's going to make someone unethical become ethical. Will it help with the whistleblowing? Yes. Will it help with identifying people that aren't, which is great. But I think that the vetting process, and the only way you're going to make everybody more honest is by the threat of a random audit.
As well as there has to be repercussions.
Well, it's,
Right.
but it's acceptable.
Even to threat of their job. I mean, my job would be at stake, right, at this minute. Should I not close my eyes to things? You can't be closing your eyes to things. You need to speak up.
Also what Mr. Egan said is really, really appropriate. We look at everything from 30,000 feet down. We look at these huge numbers and the unending paperwork produced. But the 5s and the 10s, 2,000 here, the 5,000 there that might be missed. It all adds up. And it also, usually, where there's smoke, there's fire. So usually something like that leads to something else. So,
Any other comments?
Kim,
Bob? Yes,
thank
Mr.
you. Yeah, I think that, Kim, your suggestion about Cone Resnick, going back to what they did is really the best solution. And I do think we have to keep this on a separate track with a separate mindset. There's a lot of things going on about training people, getting policies in place. All that is good. But I think a number of us, in fact, a lot of us, believe that there are folks within the city that have no interest in complying. And training, policies, procedures aren't going to deal with that. As we've said before, there have been some comments by members of the city council, perhaps by the mayor, and by others that they're really not interested in what we've got to say. They've been doing it their way for decades. And I think we need to address that. It is perhaps not as, I think it is ultimately constructive because when, as and if West Haven leaves this fold, it's our job to leave them in a situation where they're going to succeed, as opposed to just now that we're off their back, they're gonna, go back to the norm. So I really think the notion of sunshine on what's happened in the past by Cone Resnick, based on what they've already put in front of us, and bring it before the public, fairly urgently. There is an election next November. And I think we have, people are going to vote wherever they vote, but I think it's our job to present whatever we find to the people and let them decide. So I would be in favor of having Cone Resnick go back and dig down into what they've got. And whether, we do random audits as well. I think that's it. Steve's got a very good suggestion. Pat's suggestion about, following up on existing ordinances that impose personal responsibility for unauthorized things is another good idea. But I think we have to focus or keep a focus on this backward looking thing in order to change culture. In addition to all the other good things, we shouldn't conflate them.
Thank you.
so just to kind of wrap up where I'm at with this. I don't think, as far as further audits, I think those were good. I think we discussed that about 8 months ago, doing some samplings of different quarters. Okay. But right now we have something in front of us that's been in front of us since February of 22. And, the issue here is really accountability, and we can have all the procedures in place that we want. If, as you said, there's no consequence at the end of that, it's somewhat for naught. I mean, we don't need to have a third party come in and ask the question to either the mayor, finance director, somewhere, of why this contractor got a $20,000 COVID bonus, whatever that means. That could be answered by city staff, and we can then ponder that situation. To me, there's things that have occurred that I'm wondering, like, what happens when it occurs? Where is the culpability and responsibility for that? I mean, we had the chief of staff of the city of West Haven come before this board and lie to it, right? It was a very It was a very clear question about the credit card use. It was very clearly said that have all the records, nothing's done without authorization, can tell you every expenditure. And then when the Cone Resnick report comes out, it's couldn't tell you what happened there, don't have any records, people kind of do what they want. Okay, so, you know, I sit there and wonder to myself, boy, if I was mayor, I'd have a new chief of staff. Right, because I wouldn't tolerate that. And if I had the authority as a member of this board to terminate that employee, they'd be terminated. Okay, especially when you have a state oversight body who's been generous, not only monetarily, but just in its patience and working through things for the betterment of the local and state taxpayer. One thing that I will tell you that is certainly within my focus and I have definite concerns about is the ARPA funds and how those ARPA funds, not as much as how they're going to be spent, although you know, looking at it objectively and may agree or disagree with some things, but more is are people who are allotting these funds and coming up with how to spend those funds. Is there clear disclosure that they're not involved in reaping the benefit of those funds through construction projects, things like that? You know, to me, it raises issues with Mr. Carney's involvement in the ARPA funds because he has a company that does a lot of work. And is it clear that when the ARPA committee puts forward a project, and I know it goes before the council with the mayor's approval, but are there Mr. Carney's construction firm or other folks who are on that board, are they anyway involved when those projects go forward, either as a contractor, as a subcontractor, or anything else? And are those things disclosed, and do they have to get approval before something like that would go forward? And that's not limited to the chair of that board or those specific funds itself, but that's just a highlight of things that, you know, I would be disappointed, to say the least, if it all of a sudden a year from now we find out, hey, this was done, and you know, so and so construction hired them to come in and sub out the work, you know, when you're overseeing the distribution of those funds. So I'm not saying that that's happening, but you know, the way kind of things have seemed to work in this city, I certainly could see it as a plausible scenario that for some reason doesn't raise you know, a red flag. So you know, going forward, I think there's some things that we can certainly look at. We can ask those questions. We don't need a third party doing it. We are intimately familiar with the ongoings over the last year. And it's not as much the first question that gets asked, it's the follow-up questions to the answers. And I think you need a little bit of institutional knowledge, that not taken away from the expertise of anybody that we bring in to assist us in our goal, which is righting the ship. But I think having a little bit of the institutional knowledge allows you to do that. And it finds, like I said, not to sit there and point a finger and say, you did it, you did it. It's to say, that wasn't proper. And then we can put clear things in place, okay, to assure it's not done. And then everybody's clear on it too. There's no confusion, I didn't know, and things like that. And I think that's what needs to take place.
Stephen, did you have something?
This is, you know, kind of that's 100% right. But you know, starts from the top down. I mean, the mayor's got to be in, right? And my question is, are you? And the reason I asked that question is because of the article in the Newspaper Register, which a few months ago, for the last few weeks, the question for me is what was it? Were those really your quotes? Or you didn't have time to deal with MARB? I mean, if I were mayor, and not, if I was a city of West Haven voter, I would want to know that my mayor is all in and supporting the MARB and riding the ship. And I didn't get that impression from that article, which kind of bothers me. And it also bothers me that we're sitting here, and I think it's important that we know that you're at our meetings and that you're engaged. And I want to, I mean, if not, it's just a big waste of time.
The mayor can't comment about anything that might relate to an upcoming trial. in the FBI.
I'm not talking about that. There was an article in the New Haven Register where she didn't feel that what we were doing at the MARB was.
Well, that's different. I thought you
Well,
were
that-
talking about.
I'm not talking
you didn't have
about, I'm
time
not
for-
talking about I'm not talking about that.
All right.
I'm not talking about that at all. I mean, I'm talking about the article in the Register a month and a half ago that I found a little insulting, which was that you said that you had other things more important at the time. You do. That's my impression of the article. So if you'd like to address it, great. I'm not asking you to.
No. I think it deserves
Yeah, you might as well-
addressing, and I've already
You've
addressed
already
it.
commented on that.
But I,
Our office.
Okay.
right, I let OPM know. In fact, I sent an email to Mr. Egan because he asked the same question. I was appalled. No, I did not say that. And to the point of right now, with the New Haven Register, that particular reporter, I'm not going to say what name, people probably already know. We are, if he wants any more quotes, everything needs to be done in writing. I was absolutely appalled. I wouldn't spend as much time here. I believe in what you're doing. I knew when I got into office, there was many crises here, not only financial. Financial is what the big words are and what everybody's worried about, but to the point of what you're saying about hiring family members or hiring your buddy or, I haven't hired any family members, full disclosure, and I don't intend to. So I do think it's important as far as attendance on meetings. I found that one the most really disturbing one. So I went back and I took a look. So I got called up to an MFAC meeting. That was the first thing I got to do when I first came in as mayor. And it was kind of to close the business on the MFAC, and Tom Hamilton, if he's still on, knows because he was the chair of that. And that's when it came over to the MARB meeting, and Ben Barnes gave me the letter that we were in MARB. Since December of 17, I was at every single meeting, whether it be MARB subcommittee, regular MARB, special meeting. I call them side meetings because it sounds like different groups, like with Kim and Julie, and to get on track. The only time that I had a problem, okay, was September. It started in September, and the first issue was September the 8th. And the reason I wasn't at that meeting was because Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro was coming to our city to give us several $1 million to fix a bridge that we otherwise probably would have had to put off for a much longer time. So that meeting, I decided, okay, I will go and I will meet with her. And we did. We had a press conference and Channel 8 was there and everything else. Then September the 20th was another miss. And that was a miss because of the Moody's. Everybody knows about Moody's, and everyone knows, including myself, how important that rating was to get back. And we were successful. I was on the bonding calls. We had bond counsel on the calls. We had Bill Lindsay on the calls. So that was the other one. The only other two meetings I missed was October 6th and November 3rd. So even if you want to count the two that I was doing my mayoral duties and the two I missed, I would argue that's a very good record since December of 17. And I continue to want to be involved. I think it's very important for me to be involved. Also, that I don't know how public it is, I won't go into his details, but my husband's been very, very ill since May.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and he hasn't been home in 6 weeks. So I just want to let everyone know that's where some of the time.
Thank you for answering the
Yeah,
question.
I would
because it's
never,
something I was
first off,
thinking
I
about.
would never disrespect any of the members from MARB, especially for. Yeah, I mean, I was appalled, and I'm glad that you wrote out. I didn't send it to all the MARB members. I did though to send it to Kim and to Julian, but you were the one who, and I felt you were absolutely dead on right. You had a right to that answer, and I was happy to give it to you.
Well, I wasn't privy to that. I wouldn't. have
No,
asked
I
the
know,
question.
and I didn't send it
But
to
thank you
everybody.
for that, and,
Mhm.
and sorry that your husband.
Well, I
wasn't feeling
appreciate
well.
that. Thank you.
I feel for that, and I'm glad that you're all in because, as you know, go to the food chain. You on board,
Absolutely.
all we're doing is
Absolutely.
spending our rules.
And I just wanted to do one other thing that had nothing to do with this. with compensatory time payouts, I just wanted to let everyone know, it didn't start in the last 5 years, or with COVID, actually. There were compensatory payouts before me, and I do agree that there still, as far as I know, is not a clean cut policy for it, and I know that we have a lot of different agencies now, but that's one of the things that I want to pin down, that it's fair to everyone. It's all written so that there is, as we were talking about, I think when you write something down, it's clearer than if you talk about it. So I think it's important that we get our policies and procedures in order. Because when I leave, whatever day that will be, I want to know that I left this better than I found it. I think if everybody takes that attitude going forward, I don't think we will repeat history.
Mayor, since you raised it, I just have to address it because I can't leave it hanging out there. As far as the compensatory time payouts, I've read to me, which is very clear, the resolution from 2007 from the city council. Okay. And my issue with the compensatory time payouts is, one, outside the fact that when you're exempt, you don't even really get to earn compensatory times, but sometimes when you have ordinances that tie exempt people into collective bargaining agreements, right?
What are we eating? We're gonna find out, Lori. What are we eating?
Oh, yeah, don't worry, I'll know. That's not what we're eating.
Let us know when lunch is coming.
Right.
Yeah,
I know
lunch
that
today,
is-
Julian.
I'll fix that.
Muted.
So what the issue is that the $100,000, give or take, of the comp payout, so the individuals, and maybe one or two more, that Mr. Falsigno named, the problem with it is this, is that outside of the fact of whether they're entitled to comp time, right? Which under the law, they're not, but, it may have some local things I'm entitled to it. In a memorandum communication from Mr. Tiernan dated in 2019 to the council regarding the payout of vacation time for yourself and Mayor O'Brien. Okay, there was an attached memo from your personnel director from 2017, and it referenced basically, PTO and accumulated time, and it talked about sick time and something about creating some things in for pension credits and payouts for vacation time. And it said, I believe it was the bottom of the second paragraph, that there are no payouts for compensatory time. Okay, that was from your personnel director, let's say. And so she said it clearly, which seemed to work within the framing of the ordinance from the council back in 2007. So those are the things that, that raise the issue on that. I mean, when you have people, certainly struggling, and especially nowadays with the cost of everything, that department heads, and I was a deputy department, and I know what it's like when the person next to you is getting overtime and you're not. But that's what happens when you become, management. But so that's my issue where I raise that question, is why is there such a disconnect, conflict, confusion about that when your own personnel director, who benefited with this comp time payout last year, said in a memo that there are no payouts. So I just want to put that on.
And I would like to address that. So first off, the employees that you're talking about, okay, are, I know it wants to call them exempt. I've read nowhere that they're exempt. I have read that we have a resolution that puts them, their benefits, most of the benefits, not 100% like the employees, but quite a few of them, to follow the 1103 union, in which compensatory time becomes part of that, along with, other benefits as well. As far as during COVID, here was the issue. The people that were here were accruing hours. And in the past, as I said, when it went over 200 hours or a certain hour amount, you got a payout. During COVID, these folks were here. Like, I know because I was here, and no, I didn't get a payout. I'm just saying, I didn't get a payout. I'm just stating that for the record. So at the end of the day, in order to, ever catch up, if you will, you would have to pay it out or have them not be here. Those were the options at this point in time. So that would mean corporation counsel. chief of staff. In other words, 4 of my key people, personnel, 4 of my key people wouldn't have been here if they had to stay out until they used their compensatory time. So that's why we did this. Now, there is one person that I did not, a couple of them, have anything to do with. And I've stated that on the fact, in fact, Kim knows when we had the meeting, one of the meetings with Colin Resnick, and that I wanted very clear because everyone made the assumption that I approved all of these, and no, I didn't. So there were at least 2, if not 3 people that took it without any authorization from me. I did not sign off on it. I did not agree to it. In fact, one of them was a 681 employee, which that person would never in any world be allowed compensatory time.
Yeah, and I'm not referencing members of the union or even non-union members that may be non-exempt. I mean, I can tell you someone like Mr. Tiernan is an exempt employee under Connecticut's law and under the FLSA. There's a criteria that's used that really is an evaluative set that involves about 7 pieces of it to see if someone's exempt. And pretty much any department head is exempt. Most of the people, at least in that smaller list that we've seen, not everybody who's got paid out of comp time, would be considered an exempt employee under Connecticut's law and under federal law. I know, as I acknowledge, that there is local ordinances sometimes have to give more generous than what the law allows, and I'm familiar with the 2007 resolution from the town council, but as I said, what was clear, that it's either a 180 or maybe then she was confused when she wrote it, but I'll reference back to the 2017 communication from the SABO that clearly said that compensatory time is, does not get paid out. Sick time, vacation time, other things. As far as, people utilizing it, the good thing about department heads and management folks is you're generally not going to backfill if Mr. McCarthy's out, right? You're not hiring an overtime department head if he takes a day off. And I think you run into 2 issues with that. One is that as important as I'm sure they all are, and they contribute to this, to the success of the city in some parts. Cemeteries are filled with indispensable men. I'm sure having somebody off for a day doesn't stop the place from moving forward, but it certainly saves a lot of money. And things can be spaced out. The other thing is, and I'll say this is probably an issue. It's an issue in a lot of places, so it's not exclusive to West Haven. Is not only the tracking of it, but the use of it. Mind you, I believe it was Ms. Shabo's comments, either in testimony or in the newspaper, the question of how this compensatory time was earned, right, and documented. I believe one of the comments was basically, just kept on like a notepad. It wasn't put in a Munis or a system, and then it was handed into her, and that is not a good practice. I mean, Munis has. You're able to put in, your comp time into that. So overall, on a secondary note, that should certainly end, because that's a problem, right? I mean, jotting things down to when you did something and kind of saying, here you go. And I know that didn't come to you. I think it went to her office. But those are issues to their accuracy, and not only the accumulation, but use. I mean, I'm sure that somebody it would take 3-4 hours, maybe if they had an errand to run, they need to mark that down as use of it.
Just so that you're aware too, and I can't remember what council meeting it was at, but there's been a new resolution that has been adopted, and going forward is what is taking place now. Again, as I said, you make it sound like you're talking like a day or 2. The amount of hours we were talking about would not have been a day or 2. It was all through COVID. COVID lasted us a very long time. I was here weekends, and so was my staff around me that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm not.
The salaried employees.
Well, I know it's not a day or 2,
Right?
because
That's 1103.
I know it's not a day or 2, because the payouts for the comp time, like for the head of public works was almost $40,000.
And I understand that.
So I know it's not a day or two, and that's kind of
But that,
the problem.
he's only supposed to work 35 hours a week. When you're doing 70, 80, 90 hours a week, and he was, because I know, because again, I spent a lot of time here myself, and so did others, and that's what I'm talking about. So in other words, so again, they're allowed to take it. It's been passed by city council several times by different resolutions. Should I have had him stay off for 4 or 5, 6
So if he
weeks?
works 25 hours, does he pay you back?
I mean, does it work 25 hours?
I'm saying, if he works less than 35 hours, does he pay you back? It's a salaried employee. The guy's either salaried or he's not, or
He
you're not.
works more than 35 hours.
I'm
every
just saying,
week.
but it's either, but that's either you're a salaried employee or you're not. I mean, Mr. Tiernan, yeah, I mean, come on. All right. We could beat,
Well, we can look at these things
right,
further
we've
down the
been
road
beating
as we
these
get
dead,
into,
this dead horse forever.
we can get into this stuff as we get into more of the nuances of the co-resident report. But thank you.
And thank you.
Any other comments or discussions about this agenda item? Okay. So Mr. White gave a list of items that he thought was important to discuss within this particular report. I know that there are other items in here to me that are very important, that to me would be are quite, alarming, and I don't know if they've been addressed or not addressed, that I would want to make sure that the practices have been resolved. And that's dealing with the dual signature. And I think the dual signature of the checks, I don't know if that process has been addressed, and it might be something that definitely Whittlesley will bring up again. But that is something that can be addressed now prior to anybody coming in and documenting that we have an issue, and should be. No check should go out the door as far as I'm concerned unless they've been reviewed. So the dual signature process is a control, and that control right now should be put into place as far as I'm concerned.
You refer to actually having a, I mean, there is a dual signature, right? Signed
Yeah,
by
but it's
somebody,
stamped.
but it's
It's
right.
stamped on the
And by the
machine,
treasurer.
nobody's looking at the
You're
material.
actually right.
Yes.
Okay.
So in order to have a proper control. And it's the CEO, I believe. That if I was looking through the entire package and looking at it, they can miss things. They can easily miss things. That's why you have the dual, so that this way, and usually the dual is at dollar levels, whatever the dollar level is put in for a dual signature, and your bank knows that as well. So say it's $10,000. I've worked at places where it's 5,000. I've worked at places where it's 10,000. And at that point, that they feel that that's the level of risk that warrants that oversight. So therefore, that control, I think, should be looked at and made sure it's put in place now. That would be my recommendation. And to me, that is very critical. And the other area that I think is a large area of risk, and I don't know if anybody has started to look at, but I think you, Mr. Jackson, I think this happened prior to your arrival, but I don't know, the city had hired a consultant to come in the purchasing side, and, I can't, Wilma.
Yes, yeah.
And she was doing a lot of work, to help get the purchasing side up and running. And, but when Cohen came in, there has been no vendor maintenance completed in this system. And so one of the things that you don't want to open yourself up to, an area of risk of stating that there are 27,000 vendors in the system when many of them are not active vendors. They said there were only 5,000, 5,500. That is a cleanup process that needs to happen. You don't need us to tell you that. We need to get somebody on that job and get that cleaned up instead of waiting for it, because you don't want to be paying people that are not your active vendors. So those are my two large items that I don't think we need to wait for somebody else to start to address. I know overtime is important, getting that in the system and having a process for overtime, it should be in the ADP system. That's why you have a system, rather than, I'm hoping that's automated now rather than, in the past when things were on the timesheet. I don't know that yet, but we will know soon when we get some, those are the areas that, jumped out to me from, looking at the report. And, Julian, anything else that you thought that we should bring up regarding this report that's hot?
I would mention one other
I
thing
read this,
with,
yeah.
with those items, and
Yeah.
it's something that Mr. Hamilton brought up. I think it was either at our last or the full meeting before our last full board meeting, which was, I know there, I think there was some progress on it. Was having, the, part of Munis active that disallowed a department head or anybody to go below, what was appropriated in the budget. We know the process. I think it's anything under 1,500 needs approval from the mayor and the finance director under the charter. Anything over that needs approval of the council. And there's, just been a practice, sure, for decades of just going through your budget, and then at the end of the year it gets reconciled. Council moves money around. But putting that in place in Munis would prevent it, where they would affirmatively have to come to Mr. Jackson, Mayor Rossi, or the council. And I think that's just a good thing, because it keeps you from having to guess whether they're actually going below their budget line, because it prevents them from doing it.
Great. Great. Thank you. Good to see you there. Next item on the agenda is a update on the MOU action plans, and in your package today was provided few materials. One of them is not included today. We're not going to focus on that one that is not included today. We can update you on that at another time. But we are I would like to go through the personnel, and the personnel gave us a copy. Did we not get IT? These are the ones.
These are both the personnel, and then there's also these.
The vacancies of positions. Okay. Wants to walk us through these
I will
and
walk
give
us
us the
through it.
highlight, please.
Certainly, and I'll actually start with IT,
Okay.
which blends into personnel. IT, hired a critical, or extended an offer for a critical position for a network security engineer. We've had a little bit of difficulty hiring that position, but that offer is out, and we believe that it will be accepted very shortly. That will provide a three-person IT team in a community that was hit by a breach a couple of years ago. It is critical that we enhance our network security. The financial cost of such a breach, even though we are now insured for it, still be extensive, and so it's a necessary risk management item. Also, we are a lot of our machines, both end user and network backbone machines, are approaching end of life, and so we are putting together a plan to be funded either via capital or other financing mechanisms for early next year to update our systems to the point where we can actually be a lot more productive in our efforts, because almost all of us systems. Yes, some people work on trucks, and some of those trucks are not equipped with MDTs or anything like that. In large measure, we move the data as those women and men are moving material. So it's critical that we keep our tools sharp there, just as we want our trucks to be in good shape. Personnel, so that is one of the critical hires that we had identified. On the personnel, there are a few other priority positions. We have the IT position, we have a position in finance in my office. One of our, what I call a free safety, someone who does everything. So when someone's out, things don't fall down. So we saw that as a critical position. We have an offer extended on that. We have an individual working in our payroll system now. Payroll is something that we need to pay a lot more attention about. My office, Mr. Taylor, my manager are doing a lot of work on payroll, and we may have to rethink the way that we are delivering that for a payroll this complex. We may need to add additional time to that service to ensure that the checks go out adequately and timely. And we did hire a purchasing assistant so that we can make sure that our purchasing manager has the time and bandwidth necessary to take on some of the larger projects, such as review of units and putting into place all of those checks and coordinating the vendor maintenance project, which is a project.
Yes.
So those are some of the critical items that we have hired for.
Before you move on, Mr.
Certainly.
Jackson, question. So are you referring to, in this vacancy report, 1-7, the accountant position that says to be determined? Is that, are you referring to that
No.
that was filled, or is
No,
that something different?
No, the purchasing admin assistant has been filled.
Okay, that one says, that's the 1.5
Yes,
On
1.5
this report?
is filled.
filled? Okay,
1.6 is filled.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. 1.6 is a different position.
Okay.
1.4 has been filled.
Okay. And that is the buyer position, not the assistant?
That's correct.
Okay. So are you saying 1.5 has not been filled?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm glad to hear the buyer position is filled.
Yes, and actually that led to a vacancy in my office.
I'm sorry.
No, it's the candidate was extraordinary. I was happy to see that.
Okay.
Let's see, another critical position that is not yet filled is benefits HRAS. We've had a little bit of trouble in filling that position. So we may have to review some of the qualifications and salary components of that. We are working on restructuring some of those job description changes, including that other position in finance, the junior accountant position. So we have a job description, but it may not be appropriate for that we need. So we need to revise that one, as well as benefits and HRAS. And our HR director, Pamela, is working with Whittlesey on some of these concepts. Going back to that position in personnel, one person who was offered declined because of salary. Two others declined for reasons of non-disclosure. And we also looking at on the revenue side of the equation, one of the places where we are certainly looking very hard for additional staff support is in our building department. It's a critical component of our resume. Our building department is very small, vacancies within the building department. I reached out on my own to the building trades to ask for some recommendations as to some folks who may want to take their skills into this arena, and was told very frankly that there are a lot of people who would like to, but the testing and certification necessary to achieve the assistant building official certification is very timely and very time consuming. And so as long as they can work under a furnace or work on a roof, they're gonna do that. And then when they can't do that anymore, that's the time when people start to transition into trying to get a certification to review as opposed to do. So we have to think very broadly about how to do that, including perhaps working with regional communities to kind of borrow folks as necessary to maintain the certification. We have to go out of the box in terms of doing that, because if we can't open and close permits, be a reduction in revenue that we can certainly make up for if we have the right staff.
Which positions are you referring to there? Are you referring to 3.2 and 3.3?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's 3.2.
3.2. Okay.
If I could just jump in before you move on, under personnel labor relations, with the generalist position, I know it says that interviews were conducted and it no candidates were identified. You know, I will say this, yeah, and I was familiar with that position. I'm not necessarily familiar what the proposed pay grade is for the org development specialist, or what the benefits administrator pay grade is, but you know, certainly it might be something to consider. Either in the upcoming budget or a mid-year change or shifting some money around, which I certainly would support increasing those pay grades. It seemed to me they're a little bit low, and I know that there's a lot of municipalities looking for HR generalists. State, the same thing. Benefits administrators. I mean, you know, said an HR generalist, because I think also when you move, you know, that salary up, you don't want someone coming. You want someone coming in who can come in and assist Miss Albina with what she's doing, not coming in. The HR or the personnel generalist is probably a broad term, and you have lots of different levels of experience to that. And I think if you put a salary commensurate with it, with the job description expectations, you get what you get paid for. I mean, to me, those jobs, if you want someone quality moving in that knows, you know, systems, because, you know, you want someone who's going to be able to use particular personnel systems you have, be familiar with Munis, which is tough because it's a bear to know anyways, and things like that. To me, it's one of those jobs that's like a probably, you know, 60 plus at the minimum. So, I mean, I can't speak for the board. I would certainly support, you know, upgrading some of the salaries in HR if they were commensurate with job duties. And you find you'll get more candidates attracted and probably more attractive candidates.
I agree entirely. There was a time in this country where attorneys were not licensed, where doctors were not licensed, where police officers were not licensed, where teachers were not licensed. Over time, we've determined that to be a bad course of action for the public good. HR is an area that is in that arc of professionalization. So finding those those candidates, it is we are competing for a small group of folks who have the qualifications and certifications out there. And sometimes the only way to address that is to get yourself on the market.
Especially if the pay grade is lower, then that's what I think.
Yeah, I don't know what the generalists pay, but I remember seeing it. I just went, it's gonna be tough to get folks in, just because you want people who have personnel experience. And if you have that, you know, you're generally probably gonna be moving either from the private sector or from another, you know, public sector opportunity. And, you know, you have to pay to get that. And I would think, like I said, a base minimum to me is really like a $60,000. Now, someone who can come in and kind of hit the ground running with helping out. I mean, personnel is a big part of finance, and your labor relations and personnel is like what makes it all work in any government entity.
A lot of times when the salary grades are low, it's because the years of experience that you're asking for within the job description.
Right.
And that equates a lesser dollar value versus those that have been in the market for a long time and professionals in their field.
Yeah, you might want to inquire with CCM to get kind of a means within, contiguous communities or communities of similar size, and kind of see what like HR generalists are paying, what benefits, admins are paying, and then base it off that.
And they do an annual salary survey, so I'll check in with
Right.
them to see where they stand on that. And you mentioned specifically Munis, but our platform is now ADP.
All right.
And we are really trying to enhance our systemic ability to work within ADP. So I think that's one of the reasons that that it's been a little bit more difficult to find the candidates that we want, because we want them to be skilled in ADP workforce now. Because we can learn from them as much as they can learn from us.
What are the positions here, would you say, are the next critical? I see a lot of them vacant in public works. Are those critical positions?
The items that were determined to be critical
Yeah.
have already been mentioned.
Okay.
What's the issue with the IT person? Seems to be
Oh, well, we extended an offer maybe 4 weeks ago, and the offer was rejected for salary. We recently made another offer that was accepted. So that position is, the start date has not been determined. A hire has been made.
If with the, I know we talked about ransomware insurance and things like that. Do you know if there was, I know this got brought up last year. I think the town's IT director was before us, so it was a year or change ago, and about some things that they needed to do on their end, which we discussed, and things like multi-factor authentication, things like that, because I know this just because I did it for a little too, is that, especially after that, I think it was the pipeline that got hacked, and that drove ransomware and IT insurance. I mean, it literally almost tripled it. And that a lot of the insurers, and there's a Tokyo Marine and one other, I mean, it's a real small group.
It's a small.
Yeah, who's only going to take that on. 2, maybe 3 companies look at it, is that, they kind of have a list of what their expectations are, and if there's something off it, you're generally going to pay a whole lot more for that minus that one thing. That might be something that the new IT director might, they will take a look at to see if those things were put in place that were discussed. I mean, they'll know what they should have anyways, but
Yes,
there could be some cost savings there.
We are, in terms of meeting the criteria, the insurance criteria, before my time. And I think as Jermaine entered space, that was prioritized. So we actually have a very good rate for insurance. I sought insurance for the same service in a different community, and the premiums were 10 times with the city of West Haven, which indicates how well the city responded to those.
Good. Okay,
insurance
excellent. Yeah.
programs.
Over to the personnel. And then I guess I would then highlight if you're aware of any other IT items that were sitting there as open to be worked on, but maybe we can get an updated report in
Yeah, if we
their
can get an
future.
updated report, that's
Thank you. Okay,
certainly something that we can work on.
perfect.
So there are, there's the personnel side of the personnel and labor relations strategic action plan.
Yeah.
Which I think we've touched on those items. The other items, so the implementation of the wellness program, expand and enhance state HEP. I'd have to check, but we are outside of the fire district. I believe that we are 100% complete. I would actually, on these items, they don't necessarily hit the finance department, so I'm not as up to date as I should be. So I prefer to let Ms. Elby know. Respond to any questions that you may have based upon the narrative.
Not with us.
Now, if you had a medical emergency.
Sorry.
A lot of the open items here are really contingent upon filling the HR positions that we just talked about.
Thank you. Right. That's it. Any other comments or questions concerning the action plans that have been provided? We'll be looking for an update on the IT and purchasing when you're ready to get it over to us. On to other business. And you have anything? I do not.
No, just that, a heads up that Christian Council handed out something that come to the full board. Property sale. And I also just received, also for the full, getting a budget transfer recommendation from Fed. December 1st, I think. December 5th.
Any other items for other business?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did anybody ever say no?
I didn't hear Mr. White, Christine and Tom. I didn't hear your,
Just wait.
Aye.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hi.
Bye now.
It seems like.
Bye.
All in favor should be aye, not aye on that particular motion.
Instead, aye.
Okay, like, do you want